that day. At least not one you could see. But inside me, something cracked, and from that crack, everything spilled out. So, if you've ever found yourself in a moment that wasn't supposed to mean anything, but did, if you've ever tasted something you didn't realize you were starving for, then this story might hit closer than you think. Because that moment, that tiny, harmless moment, when I offered Eric a taste of what I was making, was the moment everything changed. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we don't just tell stories. We pull back the curtain on what we keep hidden behind smiles and silence. You won't want to miss what's about to unravel. Eric had been coming around a lot lately. He was my stepson's best friend, polite, helpful, always smiling. There was something easy about him, something open, like he hadn't learned to shut people out yet. He'd greet me every time he walked through that door. Not with a nod or a mumbled hey, but with warmth, with interest. Like I mattered. I used to think it was just good manners. But then I started to wonder, was he just being kind? Or was he seeing something the others didn't? My husband had stopped seeing me years ago. Not suddenly, it was more like a slow fade. First it was the small things. No more compliments. No more asking how my day was. Then the silence between us got longer. And eventually, it felt like I was living next to a stranger. He buried himself in work. Always late. Always tired. Always distracted. He'd walk in, drop his keys, eat what I made without tasting it, and fall asleep with the TV on. I could have vanished, and I don't think he would have noticed. My stepson, he was kind. Good boy. 19, thoughtful in that quiet way. He saw the coldness between us. He didn't say much, but he knew. You can always tell when something's off, even if no one admits it. He'd bring Eric over most weekends. Sometimes after school. Sometimes they'd hang out in the garage or upstairs playing music. I liked hearing the laughter again, even if it wasn't mine. Our house looked normal from the outside. Neat lawn, painted shutters, dinner on the table by 7. But inside, there was an emptiness. A kind of stillness that settles into a home when love leaves quietly and no one chases after it. I didn't realize how quiet I had become. Until Eric started talking to me. Asking me how I was. Not what was for dinner. Not where the towels were. But how I was. And when he asked, he waited for the answer. I don't know the exact moment the shift happened. Maybe it was when he complimented my cooking and looked me in the eye while he said it. Or maybe it was when I laughed at something he said, and he smiled like that laugh meant something. He wasn't trying to make me feel special. But he did, and when you've gone long enough without being seen, just one glance can feel like a lifeline. He'd lean against the kitchen counter while I cooked. Ask questions. Tell stories. Offer to help. It felt innocent. It looked innocent. But something inside me was waking up. Something I had pushed down for so long, I forgot it was there. Not desire. Not yet. It was presence. It was warmth. It was that quiet, aching hope that maybe I wasn't invisible after all. And in a house full of silence that was everything, it was just a Sunday afternoon. The kind that drifts by without asking for anything. Sunlight was spilling through the kitchen window, soft and golden, warming the tiled floor. The house was quiet except for the occasional laughter drifting in from the backyard, my stepson and Eric tossing a ball, shouting over music I couldn't quite hear. I was in the kitchen, mixing batter. Not for any special occasion. Just because sometimes, doing something with your hands is easier than feeling what's in your chest. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon filled the room. I hadn't baked in a while. Not since anyone last cared. The back door creaked open, and they both walked in sweaty, smiling, full of the kind of energy that feels foreign when your days have become a quiet loop. Eric laughed at something my stepson said, then stepped toward the counter where I was icing the first batch. He leaned in a little, resting his forearms on the edge of the granite. Eyes on the frosting. "What is that?" he asked. I looked up, surprised by how close he was. "Just cream cheese frosting. You like it?" He shrugged, a half smile on his face. I don't know. I've never had homemade. I dipped the tip of the spoon in, offered it out casually. Wanna taste it? There was a beat. Just one. A pause that shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. He looked at the spoon. Then at me. Then smiled, slow, and said, sure, if you're offering. I don't know why my hands felt warm when he took it, or why my heart thudded once, just once, when his lips touched that spoon. But the way he looked at me after. It wasn't about the sweetness. It was quiet. Still. And for a second, it felt like he was trying to read something behind my eyes. Then it passed. Or at least, he let it. He handed the spoon back, said, that's amazing, and walked over to the fridge for water. Like nothing had happened. But something had. Something small. Invisible even. But it was there. A spark in the stillness. My stepson didn't notice. He was busy pouring himself a glass, teasing Eric about something from earlier. But Eric held my gaze for just a second too long before turning away. And I stood there, holding that spoon, feeling like I had offered more than just a taste. I told myself I was being silly. It was just a look. Just a smile. He was being polite, that's all. But the truth is, I hadn't felt something like that in years. That feeling like I mattered. Like someone was aware of me. Not just walking past me in the hallway. Not just responding with a grunt at the dinner table. But really seeing me. I tried to shake it off. Went about the rest of my day pretending nothing felt different. But it stayed with me. The way his eyes lingered. The way his voice softened when he said my name. I started wondering. Was I imagining it? Was it just my loneliness making something out of nothing? Had I become that desperate? I kept asking myself that. Over and over. And then, my birthday came. Or rather, it passed. No card. No dinner. No mention. He didn't forget. He just didn't care. Said he had a late meeting. Left without saying a word. And came home too tired to ask how my day was. I sat at the table that night. A small slice of cake I'd bought for myself. One candle. No song. No kiss on the forehead. Just me. And I thought about that moment in the kitchen. That small glance. That unspoken something. Was it real? Was it mutual? Or was I just trying to fill a hole I couldn't name? I noticed myself thinking about him more. About Eric. Not in a lustful way. Just in a way that made me feel warm. Like replaying a favorite memory, even if it barely lasted a second. And then I hated myself for it. He was young. Too young. He was my stepson's friend. And yet, there was this part of me that ached to be noticed again. To be interesting. To be desirable. To be seen. Was I so starved for attention that I'd imagined desire where there was none? Or was I just finally being noticed? I didn't know what scared me more, the possibility that it meant nothing. Or the possibility that it did. After that day in the kitchen, things didn't go back to normal. Not exactly. Eric started helping out more. He'd linger in the kitchen while I cleaned. Offer to take the trash out, even if it was barely half full. Ask if I needed help with dishes, even when I told him I was fine. At first, I thought maybe he was just being polite. But it wasn't just what he did, it was how he did it. The way he stood close enough that I could feel the warmth of his shoulder without him touching me. The way his eyes searched mine when he said something simple like, need a hand with that? Like there was more in the asking than just words. And then there were the small things. Little things that didn't belong in a friendship between a young man and his friend's stepmother. We started sharing jokes, quiet ones, subtle, only meant for us. Inside moments. Ones my stepson never caught. He'd say something under his breath while I was mixing batter, and I'd bite my lip to keep from laughing. And then he'd grin, like he was proud to have pulled something out of me. There were glances. Too long, too knowing. One day, while I was chopping fruit, he reached over to grab a towel, and his fingers brushed mine. Just a second. But I froze. He didn't pull back right away. Neither did I. We just stayed there. Fingertips barely touching. He looked at me. Not startled. Just quiet. Like he was waiting for something. I turned away first. Pretended I hadn't noticed. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Then there was the scent. It sounds silly now, but one afternoon, he asked me what my favorite scent was. I didn't think much of it. I laughed and said vanilla, with a little clove. It reminds me of warmth. The next time he came over, that was the scent he wore. I noticed it the second he stepped in. And when I complimented it casually like it was no big deal, he smiled, not surprised, just satisfied, like it had been for me. And maybe it had. That's when I started dressing differently when I knew he'd be over. Not anything obvious. Just a softer sweater. A different neckline. Lip balm with a hint of tint. Nothing anyone would notice. Except maybe he did. I also started baking more. Little things. Muffins, brownies, banana bread. Things I could offer him without it seeming strange. He always took a bite like it meant more than it should. Always said, "This is amazing," like he meant me. And I kept pretending it was nothing. Until one afternoon. My stepson had gone out. Said he'd be back in an hour. Eric stayed behind. He lingered in the kitchen with me, even after I said he didn't have to. He watched me spread frosting over a cake I hadn't planned to make that morning. Watched me hum to myself while I smoothed the edges, trying to keep my hands steady. And then, he stepped closer. So close I could feel the warmth off him again. His voice was low, almost too soft to catch. "Can I taste it again?" I looked up. I knew what he meant. And it wasn't about the cake. I reached for a spoon out of habit, out of instinct, out of fear maybe. Held it out to him, trying to keep things normal, simple, safe. But he didn't take it. He looked at me. Quiet. Calm. Certain. And he said, "No spoon this time." His hand moved slowly. Not rushed. Not dramatic. He dipped his finger into the bowl of frosting, just the edge. Just enough. Then he brought it to his lips. Eyes never leaving mine. And in that moment, time didn't stop, but something inside me did. My breath. My thoughts. Everything went still. There was no laughter from the other room. No footsteps. No sound of a TV humming faintly in the background. Just the quiet. The kind that hums in your bones. He tasted it. Closed his eyes like he meant it. Then opened them again and held my gaze like he was waiting for something to happen next. And I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't stop him. Because how do you stop a moment that doesn't feel like it belongs to the world anymore? I wasn't thinking about consequences. Or boundaries. Or titles. In that moment, I didn't feel like a stepmother. Or a wife. Or someone's second thought. I felt like a woman. Wanted. Chosen. Seen. And I hated how much that meant to me. He didn't touch me. Not really. But that look. That slow, unblinking look. It reached places no hand ever could. It said what we were both too afraid to say. That we had crossed something. Something invisible. But irreversible. The silence between us became louder than anything I've ever heard. And the worst part? I didn't want to leave it. That stillness. That tension. That breathless moment wrapped in frosting and heat and something unspoken. I wanted to stay there. Just a little longer. Because whatever came next, I knew things would never be the same. What happened didn't involve a kiss. Or a touch. Or a single word too far. But it changed everything. After that day, something shifted. Not out loud. Not in a way anyone else could point to. But I felt it. Eric started pulling away. He still came over at first. But he didn't linger in the kitchen anymore. Didn't offer to help clean up. Didn't make those quiet little jokes meant only for me. He started arriving late. Leaving early. Keeping the kind of distance that feels intentional. And I pretended not to notice. I smiled the same way. Offered him tea like always. Asked how school was, how his music was going. But I already knew. He was untangling himself. trying to put space between us before someone else noticed what had never been said. My stepson didn't notice. Not really. He was busy with his own world, assignments, friends, late-night games in his room. But I noticed. I felt the silence in the places Eric used to be. Felt it in the air when I stirred batter alone. Felt it in the way I caught myself still baking things I knew he liked, only to find myself wrapping up leftovers that no one asked for. I kept baking, but no one wanted to taste anything anymore. And my husband. He was just as he'd always been. Here, but not present. Physically close, emotionally 1,000 miles away. I'd set dinner for 3. He'd eat quickly, scrolling through his phone. Barely a word spoken between us. Just the clinking of forks and the occasional sigh. And then there were the small heartbreaks. The ones that don't scream. That don't break plates or slam doors. Folding laundry that no one thanks you for. Wiping a kitchen counter that holds no warmth. Sitting on the couch with someone who doesn't turn to look at you. It wasn't the absence of Eric that hurt the most. It was the reminder of what I had returned to. The reminder that for one brief, fleeting moment, I had felt alive. And now I was back to being air again. Present, but unnoticed. I tried to tell myself it was for the best. That it was right he kept his distance. That nothing had truly happened. But every silence after that felt heavier. Every quiet dinner, every unopened bottle of vanilla, every spoon left untouched on the counter. They all whispered the same thing: you were seen, and now you're not. I didn't touch him. I didn't kiss him. But somehow, it still feels like betrayal. Not just of my husband, but of who I thought I was. I keep going back to that moment, his finger in the batter, his eyes locked on mine, the air between us thick with something neither of us dared to name. Nothing happened. Not in the way that people measure affairs. But something changed, and I can't pretend it didn't. It's not the act that lingers. It's the feeling. The warmth that bloomed in my chest when he looked at me. The way I held my breath when he stepped into the room. The ache I felt when he stopped staying. That wasn't about desire. It was about being noticed.